Warning, this is a lights out video and may contain elements of death and possession. Viewer discretion is advised.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another lights out video. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of the town of Watseka, Illinois? Because I assure you, you most likely have. However, back in the 1870s, the town was known nationwide for an event that seemed impossible to most. Today, I'm going over the Watseka Wonder and the possession of Lurancy Vennum. Now, to get to this story, we gotta start from the beginning. I know I said that the events happened in 1870, but to go back to the beginning, we have to learn about a little girl named Mary Roff. So the Roffs, they moved around the country all the time before eventually moving from Texas to a small community in Illinois. Now, Mary, she would grow up with a rough life with all sorts of illnesses. She would always get constant headaches, which she would relieve by using a technique called bloodletting. Now, bloodletting is a technique where you remove blood from your body, and it was believed to rid the body of impure fluids and cure a host of conditions. Now, Mary, she had these leeches that were pretty much her pets, and she would use these leeches to relieve the pain of the headache by putting them on her temples, and they would remove the blood, releasing the pressure. Now, these weren't all that was happening to Mary because she couldn't sleep at night. Because throughout the night, she just kept hearing these voices just calling out her name all night long. And she would have these seizures that would take multiple adults to hold her down. And after these seizures, when she would wake up, she would be in this sort of trance like state. But during these trances, people would try to interact with her, but they just couldn't because she would not acknowledge them. She would ignore them, and it was as if they were not there to her. But she would still get up and start doing her daily tasks, such as the dishes, or getting dressed, or doing her hair. But most of these tasks required eyesight, which it seemed like she was not using. She was just doing this blinded. Now, her parents put this to the test and blindfolded her, and she could not see what she was doing, yet she was still doing the task. Still, not everyone was convinced because this could have just been muscle memory. But what they did was they left her blindfolded and they had her read parts of a book, of letters, of newspapers, and she would read them word for word. One man was said to come over with an envelope which he stated he did not know the contents of, but it was from a friend far, far away, and asked Mary if she could name that friend. Mary took the envelope, she held it in her hand, and then she said a name and handed the envelope back to the man, who then proceeded to open it up, and when he read it, he read the name, the same name that Mary had just stated. However, things took a turn for the worse as her seizures got even worse, and doctors urged her father, Asa Roff, to take Mary to the asylum, where she eventually cut herself and she had died. However, after her death, her father, Asa, would start to dive deep into the spiritualism movement, which was all the rage at the time. And he would start to believe that what they were viewing as Mary's illness was actually just signs that she was a misunderstood medium. Even once, as he was talking to another medium, he received a note from her who said that it was from his daughter Mary, but there was no way to be certain of that. Now, before we move on, let's back up just a little bit because 1 year before Mary's death, Thomas and Lorinda Vennum would have a daughter that they would name Mary and would then move to Watseka, Illinois. Now, I'm pretty sure just having the same name Mary was just a big coincidence, but we won't get hung up on that because her family actually ended up getting into the habit of calling her by her middle name, which was Lurancy. So as Lurancy got older, around the age of 13, which was around the same age that Mary started to experience her seizures and trance-like state. Around that same age, Lurancy would go to her mom and start to tell her that she isn't feeling well. She's starting to feel a little sick. She couldn't sleep at night because she just kept experiencing these voices just calling out her name all night long. And she would start to experience stomach pains. And around this time is when she had her first seizure. Now, this seizure, it came and then it went, but it left her in this trance-like state where she would not move. She didn't acknowledge anyone around her, but then she just snapped out of it and she just went about her day. However, the next day she had another seizure, and when this one calmed down, she went back into that trance-like state. But this time, she started to speak to her parents. As she laid in her bed, her eyes were wide open, and she was describing this place. But the place that she was describing was not her bedroom, which they were in. She began to describe what she believed was heaven, and she even stated that she saw her brother and her sister, who both had died. Actually, her brother had died while she was really young, and her parents never really talked about him, so there was really no way for her to know what he looked like. Yet, here she was describing him in perfect detail. And as time went on, her seizures would get worse, and eventually her parents would start taking her to doctors just to try and figure out what was wrong with her, but no one was able to figure out what was going on, what was causing these seizures. Her doctors weren't convinced of this, however, and they urged her parents to take her to the insane asylum. And that's when a man from town stepped in and told them not to bring her because his daughter dealt with these symptoms 12 years previously, and he sent her to the insane asylum where she eventually died. That man was Asa Roff, Mary Roff's father. Now, he didn't want them to make the same mistake that he had made with his own daughter, so he suggested that they go and see a spiritualist doctor that he had met called Dr. E. Winchester Stevens. And desperate for any other alternative than to bring her to the asylum, which was a for sure death sentence at the time, they took his offer and they went and met Dr. Stevens. Now, during these sessions with Dr. Stevens, Lurancy would go in and out of consciousness, and each time coming back, she would have a personality that of someone who had previously died. Once even coming back as an older German lady who proceeded to curse out Dr. Stevens and Lurancy's parents. She would change into a few more people until eventually she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, her personality was completely different than those that she had been previously, and even herself. This time, she was really polite to everyone around her, and when Dr. Stevens asked who he was speaking to, she would reply, "I am Mary Roff." Now, from that point on, Mary would stick with Lurancy, and any time when anyone asked her where Lurancy was, she would just state that Lurancy was in heaven and she was getting healed, and that Mary would take over her body and control it for the time being, and she would release it back to Lurancy whenever she was better. As she was there, she would talk to Asa Roth as her father, but then she would turn to the Venoms and she would only speak to them as if she was being polite to these new strangers that she had just met. After that, she refused to stay with the Venoms because that was not her family. She wanted to stay with the Roffs. And the Roffs agreed, and they said that they would return Lurancy whenever she got to feeling like herself again. Now, people were able to brush off the claims that Lurancy made of being Mary because it was a small town. Everyone knew each other. In fact, the Roffs only lived right down the road from the Venoms. And it wasn't that far-fetched to believe that she could have just heard the name Mary in passing, and that's the persona that she decided to take on. However, as the story goes forward, there's more to it that is harder to explain. For instance, when she arrived at the Roff's house, she fell into the same mannerisms and routines as Mary, and she even showed signs of other talents that Mary had that Lurancy did not, such as being able to play the piano. She even started to talk about friends and family who did not live in the area during Lurancy's lifetime, so there was no way for her to know who these people were. And Mary's mother, before Lurancy got there, put out a velvet headdress that Mary used to wear, and she was able to recognize it and point it out at once. She even told Asa that she gave him a note through a medium, which was that note that I mentioned earlier, and she gave him an exact date, which he confirmed was true. Lurancy would go on to live with the Ross for 5 months with Mary's personality the entire time, which is an insane amount of time to live with people who know Mary and you do not falter, not slip up once into your own personality. And they confirmed that she was married the entire time until May 7th, 1878, when she stated that Lurancy's soul would come back into her own body on May 22nd at 11 o'clock. So then a couple more weeks passed by, and Mary gave her parents one last tearful goodbye, who then started to walk with her down to the Vennum's household. And when they got there, they waited, and at promptly 11 o'clock, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was Lurancy Vennum. And Mary Roff has never been heard from again. So that's going to do it for this Lights Out video, the possession of Lurancy Vennum. I want to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think that Mary had possessed Lurancy? Or do you think that Lurancy was just a really good actor? Me personally, I think it's kind of hard to argue the fact that she went 5 months without ever assuming her own personality, not one slip up. The entire time she stuck with Mary's personality. Like I said, that is an insane amount of time, and it is very rare for somebody to just swap a personality of somebody who they never knew at all. I want to hear from y'all. I want to know y'all's thoughts in the comments down below. So leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon if you haven't already so that you don't miss any future content from me. And this is actually my second Lights Out video, but this isn't the only content that I do because I also do more upbeat. I do challenges and I talk about different fandoms such as Marvel, Harry Potter, Star Wars. So if you want to go check out my channel, I got all of those down there. But if you want to keep on with this dark path, you can go watch my other Lights Out video where I talk about the Amityville hauntings in Amityville, New York in the 70s. You can watch that with this video right here. But if you want to watch one of those challenges that I mentioned earlier, right here in this video, I devoured 21 different Reese's and I ranked all of them. So I urge you to go watch those, and I will see you guys next week.